Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this fall quarter's presentation of English 100B on distance learning. In this course, we're going to try something new. We're going to learn grammar, of course, but I make you a promise that by the end of the term, you'll also become an art historian, and you should be totally in love with both English and art history if everything goes well by the end of the quarter. For today's lecture, some things that I want you to be aware of. You're going to have a green sheet contract in your laying out the textbook on pages 1 and 2 that you will sign and date. That gets turned into your instructor to the site that's indicated in your course syllabus. And we're going to go over that green sheet first thing right now on page 1 and 2. In your book, you also have page 3 and 4, which is a duplication, but that's a student copy. We'll work by contract. You'll keep page 3 and 4, but 1 and 2, as I said before, are going to be turned in. The textbooks that you're going to be using this quarter are brand new. They have a 2003 copyright date. Setting up the palette is the first one, and laying out the text is the other. And these will be available in the bookstore. The first one, so that you have a look at what it looks like, setting up the palette, looks very much like the intro logo that we just had. It has a copy of one of Vermeer's paintings on it, Girl with a Pearl Earring. We'll be seeing a lot about that. And the other textbook, which will be one that you have a lot of supplementary material in it that you will also use, is called Laying Out the Text. This is Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, Holland. And as you can see, the content is pretty much going to be based on things happening in Holland. You also need a dictionary for the course, and if you have one, that's fine. If you don't, I want to talk about some possible choices for you. You should always have a standard paperback college-level dictionary or an electronic college-level dictionary, plus even possibly a bad speller's dictionary if you need one. If you're using a bilingual dictionary such as Japanese English, that's fine, but you really do need an English dictionary to supplement what you have. And also, in addition to a good English dictionary. One of my students this morning asked, should it be American English? Yes, if possible, because the British spell things differently than we do. But if spelling is a problem for you, you need a bad speller's dictionary. If you spell a word such as psychiatrist the way it sounds, unfortunately English is not a phonic language, you're liable to come out with something like that. A bad speller's dictionary will sort things out for you, and it'll give you the correct spelling, if not an accurate definition. There's no way you're going to get to this Greek root word psych unless you happen to know it in advance. And it's too late for all of you to play games that you should have played in the 4th grade. I before E except after C. If you didn't get it then, you do need a bad speller's dictionary. Good thing about an electronic dictionary is it often comes with one. And if you can afford one, they're small, you can keep them with you everywhere you go, so you may need that. But possibly you need 3 dictionaries. All of you need at least 2. You need an American English dictionary, you need a bad speller's dictionary, or an electronic dictionary. And if you have a bilingual one, that's fine, but you can't have it on its own. Also, in your green sheet, it talks to you about the purpose of this course. English 100B is designed to help the student read, discuss, listen, write, and think. And all of those skills are interrelated. If you're deficient in one, chances are excellent that you're deficient on more than one. So we'll take listening tests. I'll pop about 5 of them on you during the quarter, and it's just going to be a 1-page reading. I'll ask you to do multiple choice responses to those tests, and it's designed to help you tune in. I'll get back to that point in a minute. In the course, the emphasis is going to be on the writing of effective sentences, paragraphs, and essays. Now, 2 things before we go further. A listening test. I'm going to read you a 1-page narrative, as I said, and I'm going to ask you 10 multiple choice questions. And most people, by the time they get to college, have developed a great skill of being quiet, looking in the right direction, not talking to your neighbor, and being somewhere else. For example, right now as we speak, somebody could be thinking about what's the movie I want to see this night, what's the movie I'd like to see this weekend, the weather's still nice, would I like to go to the beach? And then somebody like me says, so we'll have a test on that tomorrow, and test caught your attention, but everything else went by somehow. A listening test is going to help you stay tuned in. And although I will record those scores, this is a writing course, and I'm simply trying to help you to improve that skill. Also, I told you that the emphasis would be on the writing of effective sentences, paragraphs, and essays in that order. We're going to review sentence structure first, because it's my very strong feeling that if you don't have mastery over the sentence, you shouldn't be writing a paragraph. When we've completed what we have to do on sentence structure, we'll move into the paragraph and we'll do 3 rounds of such paragraphs. After that, we'll move into the essay. But just as I said, you need mastery over the sentence before you put your attention on paragraph writing. You need mastery over the paragraph before you put your attention on essays. Every day when you watch the program, you need these materials with you without exception. You have to have paper, you have to have pen. You should have 2 different colored highlighters at your side, and you need both textbooks without exception for each class lecture. I will give you a letter grade on everything you do because you're used to measuring up to a standard and you know what A, B, C, D, and F mean. When we get actually into paragraph and essay writing, I will give you a different set of grades to respond to, non-ego threatening grades for the most part. A plus is very good, a check is middle of the road, a minus is weak, and an F is off the chart. You don't ever want an F. But during the quarter, if something is a check over an F, a plus over an F, it means you need help. By the time we get to the final exam, an F will be deadly. And although I do look at all of these grades and assignments that you must submit during the course of the quarter, and I record them all, the first critical exam that you need to be really concentrating heavily on is your grammar exam. And although we'll finish talking about grammar fairly early in the quarter, 3-4 weeks through, I don't know, we'll finish it when we do. Grammar is going to come up and we're going to see how it affects your writing of paragraphs and essays. So I'm waiting until the week before final exam to give you that particular exam. You have to pass that exam with a D or better to receive credit for the course. If it's lower than that, you're done with English. You'll come to the final exam on invitation only, and that final exam must be taken by you. If you don't take the final exam for the course, you will get a no credit, and most receiving institutions translate a no credit as an F. Final exam will be 3 hours long because you're going to be asked to write an essay of my choosing on a topic that you haven't seen until the day of the essay itself, and I'm looking at that time for mechanical proficiency and also for content control, and very good content, knowing the difference between primary information, between secondary information, and writing pretty much free of error. So attendance at that final exam is by invitation only. You have to pass the grammar exam first, and if you get an F on any part of that exam, something like a plus over an F, a check over an F, it means a no credit for the course. One other thing of importance is plagiarism. I'm sure we're not going to have a problem, but this is something I want you to be very much aware of. Any part of a paper at any time that shows evidence of copying word for word from an outside source or from another student's paper is not acceptable. It could earn you an F on the paper and or an F in the course at the discretion of the instructor. And finally, incompletes. Instructors give incompletes when they choose to. I never give incompletes. I won't be giving you an incomplete for this course. I have 2 excellent reasons. One is that they hang over your head. The other, far more important, is that they hang over my head, and that isn't going to happen. So at the end of the quarter, you will wind up with a definite grade. When you have finished reading everything there is to read on that green sheet that's in your book, I want you to sign it. Some of you sign with a Hollywood signature, or you sign in Hangul or Chinese characters that nobody can read, and that's fine. But then I want your name printed very legibly below that and the date that you turn in that contract. You'll turn in page 1 and 2 from laying out the text. You'll keep in your book page 3 and 4, which is a duplicate, but sign and date both copies. There's some other things you have to do right away. One of them is to subscribe to the class listserv. Another one is to get instructions on how to send a message to the listserv, which goes to all of us in the course, or to your instructor. And for information on how to do that, please refer to your course syllabus, and please don't send attachments via email. So now we're ready to start business. And today's topic, these are the things I hope we cover. We're going to start with a note-taking presentation on the simple sentence because I'm reviewing grammar for you from scratch. And to that end, we're going to use your Setting Up the Palette book on page 3. Those of you in studio can turn to page 3 and leave it, and we'll go through. You can underline, highlight, make notes as we go. It's the Setting Up the Palette book on page 3. And as we go through that, this is an overview today because we're going to come back to that concept again on the next lecture, you're going to master terminology, definitions, and rules that apply to a clause of any kind, and the simple sentence in particular. And then we're going to start to look at different possible variations for the simple sentence, which include one that has only one subject, only one verb, a simple sentence that's written in command format, a simple sentence that has multiple subjects and multiple verbs, or any variation of that, multiple subjects and just one verb, or only one subject and multiple verbs, and then also the inverted clause, and we'll talk about what that means in just a few minutes, as well as the question. And all of those concepts we'll have examples in the book to analyze. If time permits today, we'll use the online grammar tutorial to supplement any information that I present to you in class. And I'd like you to make a note in your book of the URL that will take you directly to that grammar tutorial. It's a very easy one. Grammar, be sure you spell it with an A, grammar, De Anza College, one word, .org. So it's grammar dot De Anza College, no spaces, .org. And I wanted to talk to you right now, before we get into anything proper, about the importance of spelling. It's really easy to misspell, and if you misspell grammar, you aren't going to get to that website. If you look in the studio at the one of the sides that we have here, there are students up at the top. We'll talk about them in a minute. Pippa, and then Scott, and then Maritza, and then it says Sustin on the other side. We're on the other side of the group. Now, Sustin is really Justin. Easy to make that kind of a mistake. You don't want to do that on a paper that you're turning in to me for a grade, because you're going to get docked for misspelling. Jerry in the front is another case in question. That's really my error, because his name is Gerald, and I thought, well, probably if he's going to go by Jerry, he's going to use a J, but I'm wrong on this one. It's a G. So spelling is something we have to be very, very accurate about during the course of the quarter. You're also going to have a written assignment. If we get to it today, we'll discuss it in full in laying out the text on page 11. I'm going to ask you to write a 4-paragraph diagnostic essay about yourself. It doesn't have to be 4 paragraphs. It can actually be longer. And then you will submit that diagnostic essay typed to the site indicated in your course syllabus on the date that the assignment is actually due. And when we get to talking about that, you'll see that we have several samples for you to look at of what other students have had to say and how long should it be. And it'll help all of us to learn a lot about you during the course of the quarter. And it'll also be helpful for me to pinpoint where your errors in writing are. At the beginning of a course in English, everything about English is a problem, right? I like to tell people that when somebody says, what do you do for a living? I try usually not to say I'm a professor of English, because people invariably back up without exception and go, whoa, I better watch the way I'm speaking. But once you write that first diagnostic essay for me, which I will not give a letter grade to unless you don't turn it in. If you don't turn it in, I will give you a letter grade, and that's going to be an F. But if you do turn it in, promise it's just going to be a check, because what I want to do is go through very carefully with a red pen and mark everything you do right and everything you do wrong. And that will give you an individualized self-portrait, if you like, of where your grammar problems are. Some people have problems with run-ons. Some people have problems with fragments. Some with spelling, some with agreement, some with diction. And we'll get it narrowed down to just where your problems are likely to be. And then as you go through the course, you know that those are the things you have to work on particularly hard. So we'll go to page 3 in setting up the palette, and I want to start out with a discussion on an introduction to the origins and definitions of 2 commonly used words in English. Now, this is really a part of English that is formally called linguistics. I notice that I've always been attracted to linguistics, and this time in these books it becomes particularly critical, because 2 of the words I'm interested in right at the very beginning are text and textile. They look like they mean 2 very different things, but actually they come from the same source and their meanings are very closely linked. This is what your book says. If you were to take a close look at the history of words, I may have used slightly different wording, but this is basically what you're looking at, and how they entered the English language, one of the things you'd have to discover is that there's a very close link between text and textile. If we look at the origin for the word text, we see that it comes from the Latin word textus, and the Latin word means fabric, structure, and text. And it also comes into English from the past participle of another Latin word, texere, which happens to mean to weave. When we look at a current definition in English, text means the actual structure of words in a piece of writing, a sentence, a paragraph, an essay. In other words, the wording that you're using. And it means the actual or original words used by an author, you or anybody else. So text is about words, basically. And that has relevance to us because this particular course is built up from letters. And it's about sentences built up from words. And it's certainly going to be about paragraphs built up from carefully controlled sentence types. You know my philosophy. My philosophy is that you shouldn't be driving down the road in a car if you can't tell the difference between the gas pedal and the brake. I'm one who has trouble distinguishing the difference between the gas pedal and the brake, so it's a very rare occasion that you find me driving down the street. But by the same token, you shouldn't be writing if you don't know what you're doing. What's a sentence? What's a fragment? What's a run-on? I haven't a clue. What do you mean about primary information and secondary information? What's a topic sentence? What's a thesis statement? You have to know, you have to have those tools in your toolkit if you're going to be able to control your writing. The other word that interested me to start out with was the word textile. Now, it seems very different. This is on page 4 of your text. And this word comes from the Latin words textilis and textus. Here's what they mean. Having to do with weaving or with woven fabric, and they also mean a fabric made by weaving. Well, it's not only a course about text, words, this is also a course about textiles. And the subject matter of this textbook focuses on the life and work of the Dutch master painter Johannes Vermeer. We're going to take a look at one of the paintings that this Dutch artist did. It's called The Art of Painting. If we could take a look at that right now. The Art of Painting. You'll get a good photograph of it, but until a good one comes up, this is basically what we're seeing. Now you have my version of it. We should get a very good version of it in just a second. Now this painting was done by the Dutch artist Johannes Vermeer, and if you know anything about art history, and today it isn't important that you do, look at the date, 1666 to 67. He made that painting more than 300 years ago. It's a painting of an artist in a studio. Many people think it might be a self-portrait. Nobody knows what Vermeer looked like, and he's painting the muse of history. Now, what does that have to do with textile and a fabric? We're going to find out. A textile, as you might know, is built up from a series of interlaced threads. A canvas is built up from those threads. It often, not always, becomes the ground sheet for a painted surface. And if we're talking about Vermeer as a case in point, he painted on canvas most of the time. So textile is the ground sheet for the paintings that you look at, and text is words for us that we use in some way. By the way, the interesting thing about Vermeer, and one of the things that impelled me to choose him, was last year, for starters, just about this time a year ago, I picked up in a bookstore at random the book called Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier. I'd seen the cover many times. Of course, the cover is the one of the Vermeer painting that is so beautiful to look at. And I read the book and I was completely captivated. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And there is the painting in question. And then my daughter said, one of my daughters said, there's another artist, there's another book written about that particular artist, and it's called Girl in Hyacinth Blue. And I started reading these novels that were based on paintings by Vermeer, and I got very much interested in what this man was doing. Well, the interesting thing about Vermeer is that there are only 3 documents known about him. He's painting in the time of Rembrandt. He is alive at the same time of Rembrandt, slightly younger painter. And yet there's a lot on Rembrandt, lots and lots on Rembrandt. But when you get to Vermeer, there's a birth certificate. When was the man born? 1632. There's a death certificate. When did he die? 1675. And there's a marriage certificate. He did marry somebody. We'll go back to those photographs at a later point. In the meantime, let's talk about the fact that Vermeer's canvases are built up from carefully controlled layers of paint that are applied to that ground sheet, which we said was canvas. And those paintings tell stories. And those stories In the words of this particular art historian, Johann Huizinga, portray figures whose actions are steeped in mystery. The words have no sound. The thoughts have no form. So this is kind of voiceless textiles. You're looking at a painting, and you have to decide what it means. Vermeer didn't give you a clue. So you have to decide what prompted him to paint a particular painting, and we're going to look at a lot of his paintings in the course of this particular term. So this book is going to make use of both text and textiles. You see the interconnection? On the one hand, when we talk about text, the course is going to take you, the writer, on a word-filled journey where words become sentences, of course, sentences become paragraphs, created with control and skill. Those last two terms are important. Anybody can fill up a page with sentences. Your job is to have control over a particular sentence type and to do it using the Queen's English as opposed to it don't make no matter. That isn't going to happen, right? It's going to be good English. You're going to control it. The writing skill that you're going to develop is what is going to make readers want to give you a hearing. I want to come back to that concept in a second. Just as selected viewers of Vermeer's artwork wanted to give voice to those wordless canvases that added richness to the artist's unspoken thoughts. And how did they do it? Four major writers today wrote novels on works that there is no information about. I mean, the man only has 35 known paintings that exist in the world today. He might have done more, we don't know. He only did about 2 a year, but if he did do more, we don't know where they are. They've disappeared. Now, that business of giving you a hearing, writing, some of you may be familiar with the novelist George Orwell. One of the books that he wrote was called Animal Farm. You remember that? Where the animals were very dissatisfied with the way Farmer Jones was running his world, and so they got rid of Farmer Jones, and they decided they could do a better job themselves. And the two pigs, wasn't it? Snowball and Napoleon decide they're going to pretty much call the shots, and the end result is they work the other poor animals, including the boxer, the horse, to death. If you remember, they get some rules up on the side of the barn in the very beginning. No animal will sleep in a bed, and they have several other commandments. But then, as time goes by and the pigs become more like people, they amend those rules. No animals sleep in a bed unless it has sheets. So they move into Farmer Jones' house, and they sleep in his bed, and they wear his clothes. And in the final scene, there they are in tuxedos toasting each other about how great they are, and they're far more tyrannical than poor Farmer Jones could ever dreamed of being. Well, when he's not writing fiction, one of the things that Orwell said that really caught my attention a long time ago was the reason you write is to get a hearing. Not to get a grade, I know that's why you're writing, but you write to get a hearing about something you think is important. If you go home today for lunch and you open a can of tuna and there's a popsicle wrapper before you get to the tuna, you're going to want to make a complaint to somebody. If you write an it don't make no matter kind of letter to the corporation that produced that can of tuna, they're going to take it and drop it in the circular file. Guarantee. But if you write it to the corporation in a good letter, you might get yourself a free case of tuna. That's getting a hearing about something that you think is important. Anybody with a question at all? Yeah, I'm tempted to sidetrack for just a second and to let viewers at home have some kind of a clue about the different areas of study that you people are involved in. Pippa is in the back over here, and your major is?
Microbiology.
Microbiology. She's over here on my left. And Scott, you're majoring in?
Business administration.
Business administration. And Maritza?
Architecture.
Architecture. How about you, Justin?
Business administration.
Business administration. When we come down to the front, Yvonne?
Education.
Yvonne is going to be a teacher. And Jerry?
Currently studying automotive, but my goal is to become a Marine.
A Marine. And then law. I heard that too the other day. And Janice, you're studying?
Graphic design.
Graphic design. And Vince?
3D animation.
Animation. 3D animation. 3D animation. If we move over to the other side of the studio and look up in the back row, Farah, what are you studying?
Computer science.
Computer science. How about you, Ben?
Music.
Oh, Ben is down in front of me. It's Jeff back there.
I'm going to be studying history. I want to become a history teacher.
He's going to become a teacher too. And how about you, Jessica?
Communications.
Communications. So she's going to be working in television, maybe, we don't know, some of the media. How about you, Scott? I love his major.
Life.
Life. Scott is going to major in life. And El Bolin, your major is?
Animation illustration.
Animation illustration. Are you going to use the computer or are you going to use your hand?
Both.
Both. How about you, Ben?
Majoring in music.
And again, what do you play? Piano and
Bass.
bass. Okay. How about you, Amy?
I'm undeclared, but I like to become a translator.
Oh, right, from Japanese to English. We were talking about a good film out that she could understand in Japan, and I had to live with English, called Spirited Away. It's an excellent film. Let's go to the book and start a review, and we'll stop at different points along the way to answer questions that you may have. Let's go to page 6. Now, I'm reviewing for you, and what I'm asking you to do is to highlight key terms and definitions, because when that grammar comes up the week before finals, you're going to need to know this. This is going to come back to you, and you're not going to be able to cram at the last minute. So if you're uncertain on any of these definitions, these you need to master. I would start now with the clause. I would highlight the definition of a clause. It's a group of words that contains a complete subject and a complete verb. Any clause is going to answer to that definition, and there's more than one kind of clause in English. The magic word in that definition is complete. A clause always has a complete subject and a complete verb. Now, the subject is what the sentence is about, and the verb can be an action, and it can be a state of being. It does make some kind of a statement about the subject. If I'm talking to any one of you in here and say, you are here in the studio today, the verb is are, and that's a state of being. You aren't doing anything. We're just all physically located in this spot. But if I said, Ben, would you please bring me a pen? Then bring would be an action verb, because I'm asking you to take something from where you are to hand it to me. I want you to memorize this. All sentences are determined by the number and type of clauses they contain. You need to know that forever. If you can figure out what kind of a clause you're looking at, how many clauses you have, then you're going to be able to tell what kind of sentence. There's no magic to it. And the good news in English is that there are 4 main sentence types. We're going to master and then take a quiz on each one as we go over them and review them. There's the simple sentence, the complex sentence, the compound sentence, and the compound complex sentence. Now, I am suggesting that each of you makes a grammar cassette tape starting today for your own use, and that you listen to it when you take a walk, when you drive to school, however you listen to things best. This is an excellent way of studying if you have a cassette grammar tape. Tell yourself you're worth it and buy yourself one. I do have to tell you the story of my cousin Paul. That's really an important story. When I was doing my student teaching many years ago, I lived with 2 of my cousins. I come from a big Italian family, and this was 3 different aunts represented, my mother and 2 other aunts, and one of my cousins was in my class, this level of English. He failed every test I gave without exception, and because he was my cousin and because we were living in the same apartment, I would go over the information with him, re-give him the test, and he'd fail it again. And one night I thought, there's got to be something to this. So after dinner, I went into the kitchen to take a look at how he was studying. I've never forgot that. I wish I had a camera. I should have taken a picture. Because he was sitting at the table, and he had his textbooks for all of his classes stacked up at one end, his history book, his English book, all the things he was taking, and he was on the chair. His feet were on the table near the books, and he had a candle just beyond the books that was lit. His eyes were closed. And I said, Paul, what are you doing? And he said, I'm studying. How can you do it with your eyes closed? What's the candle for? And he told me, well, he read that Abraham Lincoln studied that way, and he thought this was kind of a learning by osmosis. The candle with the lit flame was going to pull the information somehow out of the books, through his feet, down through his body, and out through his mind. As you know, it didn't work. I gave him a D, and the master teacher, who knew he was my cousin, bumped that grade up to a C. My aunt didn't speak to me for the next 6 months, but you know what? He has since graduated with a degree in aeronautical engineering from Cal Poly, where you want to go, Maritza, and he still can't write his way out of a paper bag. He is like JR, living on North Fork or South Fork in Dallas, and he would love to write for the magazine and the engineering firm he works for, but he's never got beyond that candle-lit learning stage. If he'd had a cassette, a grammar cassette, it would have worked. He could have had his feet up on the table, he could have had his eyes closed, he could have pressed play, rewind, play, and the information would have gone down like butter. Kind of like when you listen to the recording of a new song. one of my children went to go see a concert by Alanis Morissette over the weekend. If he bought the tape, he probably listened to a song once, okay, second time, third time singing along with the CD. You know that. You hear it when you drive along the freeway. So start your grammar cassette tape right now, tonight, and this is how it would go. Read into the cassette recorder yourself at about this pace. Give it a heading, Grammar Cassette Review Tape. You'll be adding on to it by the day. Start out with this. A clause is a group of words that contains a complete subject and a complete verb. You can add the next two lines if you like. The subject is what the sentence is about. The verb, an action or a state of being, makes a statement about the subject. You're certainly going to add this. All sentences are determined by the number and type of clauses they contain, and possibly even you would read into your recorder that there's a total of 4 main sentence types in English. They are simple, complex, compound, and compound complex. So that's my suggestion. I hope you get started on that today. Here's the next thing on page 7 that I'm asking you to highlight and commit to memory. A simple sentence contains one main or independent clause that stands alone. Know that, people. Know that cold. Notice something. Independent and main are interchangeable words. So if I were to ask you in the next session, what's a simple sentence? And you told me it's one main clause that stands alone. Somebody else said it's one independent clause that stands alone. You would have said the very same thing. Now, I am reviewing, and so I want to check and see who knows what. Jeff, I want to start with you. There's an example. I'm going to call it a simple sentence in a minute, and this is what it says. I look at paintings by Johannes Vermeer. Where would you say the subject was, Jeff?
Paintings.
Paintings. Okay, I'm going to say no to that, and I'm going to get a check above it, but I'm not going to tell you why for the moment. I will in a minute. Jessica, what would you say the subject is?
Johannes Vermeer.
I'm going to say no to that as well. We're in the right place, people. We're learning the right subject. Farrah, where's the subject?
I.
I. When you find the subject in your book, please, people, get a line under it. That's how we're going to deal with subject words, one line under the subject. We're going to put 2 under the verb, if we can find a verb. Ben, where's the verb that goes in that particular sentence?
Look.
So put 2 lines under look, if you would, and then make this obvious. The subject comes in front of the verb. And that's going to be the normal pattern for an English sentence. It's going to be the pattern approximately 90% of the time. I'd like you to make another note in your book, M-1, and that means main clause number 1. How many main clauses can you have in a simple sentence? Total of 1. And you're telling yourself that you see 1 there. If you agree that you only have 1 main clause, and that's what I would say, put a little note at the end of it, SS. This is a simple sentence. Now, before we get past this, I want to know why we had to reject paintings and why we had to reject Johannes Vermeer. Scott, can you tell me what's wrong with paintings?
Paintings is the object of what you're looking at. It has nothing to do with...
That's true. It's the object of something else as well. What would you say?
Of the verb.
No, what is it, Maritza? The object of what? Pippa, do you have any idea?
No.
Yvonne, do you have any idea?
Preposition?
It's a prepositional phrase. It's just a throwaway prepositional phrase. If you accept one of it, part of it, you have to accept the whole thing. And what about, and I'll get to that question, Maritza, in a minute, I promise. What about, Scott, Johannes Vermeer? Why could that not be the subject of this sentence?
It's in a prep phrase.
Read the prep phrase to me.
By Johannes Vermeer.
Okay, so here's the point. I could throw out those 2 prep phrases. I could toss them out completely. I'm still left with the core structure for that main clause for that simple sentence, I look, right? In fact, I could put a period after look, couldn't I? I could throw the rest out. So that's why those words are not. And then remember the word order. This is going to be your other clue. 90% of the time, the subject is going to come in front of the verb when you're analyzing a clause. That's where you want to look. Maritza, what's the question?
No, I was thinking to parenthesize the whole scene, act painted by Johannes.
2 separate ones.
2 separate ones.
Right, because, and we're bringing up something here, and we're stumbling for the moment over prep phrases, and that's fine. because we're going to get to prepositions almost immediately, and it's going to remind you of why it's very important for you to understand prepositions and prepositional phrases, because if you don't, you're going to continue to trip over the object of a preposition and confuse it with the subject of a clause. And a prepositional phrase is going to be kind of self-contained. It's going to start with a preposition. It's going to end with a noun object. Paintings. So the next one, Maritza, starts with another preposition, by, and ends with another noun object, which in this case is the artist Johannes Vermeer. So in this particular sentence, this is what it looks like. You might make a note next to the example in your book. It has one subject and it has one verb. That's what it looks like. Highlight, people, we just gave an illustration of why you need to know this information cold, that it's going to be helpful to remember that the normal word order or syntax in English is subject, verb, object. You won't always have an object. If I asked you, who's hungry, and Jerry said, I am, you surely have a subject, I, you have a verb, am, but you have no object at all. But when you do, generally it's going to be subject, and then it's going to be verb, and then it's going to be object. In this case, that entire prep phrase would serve as an object. Is that clear? Does anybody have a question about that? Now remember that today when I'm reviewing things for you initially, I actually hold you responsible for nothing. But the moment I've covered it, you are absolutely responsible for putting in time to learn everything I've just said. College-wide expectation, when you take a class, and ours is worth 5 class hours a week, that you're going to put in 2 hours of outside time for every hour that you put inside. That means during a week, you owe me at least 10 hours a week. Now, sometimes it won't take you that to master these grammatical concepts. And what might you be doing with the rest of those hours? Well, one of the things, once we get into the books, is you might decide you want to read those novels that have a lot of information about Vermeer. They're fascinating. Once you pick it up, you won't be able to put it down. While you're learning sentence structure and reviewing the simple sentence in particular, I'm suggesting that you learn to track every clause as it occurs. And also do a clause tabulation for each sentence. We just did that a minute ago, to make sure that you have the right number and type of clause, in this case, to form a simple sentence. So one main clause, I can indicate it 1MC, or I can indicate it M-1, either way, equals SS, a simple sentence. And I would make those notes. When you were in high school, I know you had teachers and textbooks that were not your own, and people said, don't put any marks on the pages because 40 generations of students are going to have to use these books, but that's not the case for you. These are no buyback workbooks. I want to call them Bibles. I think you're going to have them forever, and we're not going to waste a page. Some of the comments that I've heard students make in the past, and they were very valid ones, 2 of them that I've addressed in these new books. The print is so small and the spacing is so tight, it's hard to make any kind of underlines, any kind of notations. You're not going to have that problem. The second, if you ask us to do some extra practice exercises, it's hard for us to remember the format you want us to use. You aren't going to have any problem with that either. You will, by the end of the quarter, use every page in both of these books. Overwhelming, some 550, 600 pages, you'll use them all. Anybody with a question so far? Because we're going to look at another variation of the simple sentence. Okay. Jerry was a little bit worried the other day, and he said, English, kind of hard. You know, it's not. If you put in the time, it's not. If you put in the time and the concentration and you work through it, don't fall behind, you're not going to have a problem. You're going to come out wired for sound, grammar capable at the end of the quarter. You know that man on television who advertises clothing, men's clothing, and he says, I guarantee it. I can't remember the ad, but I know you've seen it. I'm guaranteeing that for you. Yes, Scott, a question.
You mentioned something about the normal word order subject, verb, object. Is there any opportunity, or can you give an example of when the object may be actually not, like be before the subject or in between the subject
No, I
and
can't
verb?
think of when that would be the case. If you said, I like books, it's going to be I, subject, like, verb, books, object, right? If you say, I want a sandwich right now, it's going to be subject, verb, object. I can't imagine in English where you would say sandwich, I want. Another language might do that. Spanish might do that,
Yes.
but not English. It's going to be subject, verb, and then object. Yes, Pippa?
When you had this sentence, I look at paintings by Johannes Vermeer, and at paintings and by Johannes Vermeer were prep phrases, but not all objects are prep phrases.
No.
Thank you.
But a prep phrase, that's a good question. A prep phrase could be an object, a single word could be an object. That's going to change on you from sentence to sentence, from example to example. Absolutely. Any other questions, Scott?
And some sentences don't have objects,
That's right. Remember what I said? If I said, who's hungry, and Jeff says, I am, that's all we've got. I is the subject, am is the verb, and that's where it ends. So sometimes you'll have an object and sometimes you won't. And by the way, we could get fancier, and we're not going to. We could have direct object, we could have indirect object. But one of the things I've found about people who resist learning and mastering grammar, I'm going to tell you a true story, it's as recent as yesterday, is that too much terminology comes your way. And you say, oh, this is so complicated, I can't learn any of it, so I'm not even going to bother. I've streamlined it for you people. I'm not even going to call an adverb an adverb. I'm going to say verb modifier. I'm going to say noun modifier. If you want to get more formal and more technical, be my guest, but I don't think you need that to master the language. Yesterday, in another class in English, one level lower than this, there were 5 students who have a bachelor's degree. They have a bachelor's degree. That means that they've already had freshman composition and so forth. But somehow, they missed the boat, probably because the boat never came by, which would have given them a foundation in grammar, and you don't want to do that. Here's another simple sentence variation. Let's look at this one next. This is on page 8 in your book, and this tells you that the simple sentence can be written in command form. So I want you to look at 2 examples. And again, what I'm doing on this review is to see who knows what. Where are the weak spots here? Oh, look at this one, Vince. Look at the facts about the artist's life. Where would you say the verb is? What do you think? Janice, where's the verb? I would say look. Put 2 lines under that so we don't lose it. If look is the verb, Janice, where's your subject?
Artist?
Artist, first of all, is possessive, and it's not the subject. We'll come back to why in a minute. Elbelin, do you have any idea where, if any place at all, there is a subject that goes with that word look?
Facts?
No, going to reject that too. And how about you, Amy? Is there a subject in the sentence? No? You know what? If it doesn't have a subject, it must not be a sentence, because you remember that a clause is a group of words with a complete subject and a complete verb. One main clause makes up a simple sentence, and unless we find a complete subject, we must not be looking at a sentence. Ben, do you see a subject?
I thought it was facts too.
Facts, no. Pippa, do you see a subject?
Isn't it before look, I implied subject?
You can't imply I, but that's the warmest answer that I've heard. Jerry, what were you going to say?
Life.
Life. No, I reject that too. Yvonne, where's the subject?
Implied you.
Implied you. Would you all write that in to the left of that example? Would you put parentheses around it? Would you underline it? And then I want to back you up to a rule we looked at just a minute earlier. The simple sentence may be written in command form. This is a special case because when you're commanding somebody to do something, the subject can be stated or implied. And if you go by the way most of us speak, it tends to be implied. Before we deal with that, let's get a label above this and call it M-1, and also make a note that it's a simple sentence. We'll come back to that in a minute. When you're giving somebody a command, you can put a you in front of it. I can be talking to Amy and I can say, you close your book. And I could be talking to the 7 of you that I'm looking at over here, and I could say, you don't talk. But would you agree that most of us would say, close your book, please. Don't talk. Hand me your pen. Bring me a cup of coffee. It's always going to be you. And here's another funny thing about that. I could be saying to Yvonne, look to the right, and I could be talking just to Yvonne. But I could be talking to 8 of you, and I could say, look to the right. In both cases, the subject is going to be you, singular or plural. That isn't going to change. Okay? Well, you can guess about the story on look at the facts about the artist's life. Why, Maritza, is facts not the subject of that sentence?
At the fact is the preposition of phrase.
Right. Where does it go? Read it to me, that phrase.
At the facts
Parenthesize it, people. Where's the next one?
about the artist's life.
So facts and artist's life are all part of two throwaway phrases. We can toss them right out. And remember the word order. The subject is coming in front of the verb. Is that true? It's just that you have to remember you can have an implied subject, and usually do when you're dealing with a command. Jeff, if we look at a really short version, look, that's all I've got. Look, and then I've got a period. Where's the verb?
Look.
Sure. Where's the subject?
You before it.
Exactly. No matter how short that command is, we still have a complete subject, a complete verb, still gives us a main clause, gives us a simple sentence. And would you make a note in the preceding example, the verb is look, and you have space to make that note in your text. Now that's something to remember. I'm asking you to highlight what follows on page 8. This is something you add to your grammar review cassette tape. The sentences that you just looked at were written in command form. And the subject is going to be an understood or implied you. Understood and implied mean the same thing. You're putting it in parentheses because you can't see it, but it's still there. You have to know it's there. So on page 8, when you have an implied subject, this is the sentence we were looking at just a second ago, your subject, you, is implied. It goes in parentheses. Look is your verb, 2 lines under that. And it's going to look like this. S with parentheses around it, subject implied, 1 subject and 1 verb. And in the next example, you is still implied and look is stated, a very short example of a simple sentence. Both of these, in fact, form main clauses. Both of them create simple sentences. And I would add all those notes. Writing things down helps you reinforce and helps you memorize very quickly. Here's something else you need to highlight and memorize immediately before I see you again. In command form, people, the subject is going to be a stated or an understood you. Know that. Highlight it. You cannot imply I, he, she, it, we, or they. You cannot. Pippa, who gave us a warm answer and said I was the subject, was warm, but it can't be I. He, she, it, we, or they. It's only you. You're asking somebody to do something for you when you have a command. Anybody with a question on that? Scott?
So the, you can imply you, or you can actually write it in the sentence, and that's really the author's
Your call.
option. And it's your choice about the feeling you want to convey when you're writing to whomever you're writing for, right?
You, don't be late again. You're telling somebody and you're saying this is the end of the line. You might want to put that you in because you're making it a more forceful command, right? And it's a softer, a gentler one if you say don't be late again, please. But you stated or implied as your call as a writer, absolutely. As part of that control issue that we were talking about. Anybody else with a question? Okay, on page 9. A simple sentence can have more than one subject, more than one verb. Now we're going to start to look at some examples. Somebody who wasn't as knowledgeable as you're going to be almost instantaneously would look at this example and say, oh my goodness, that's a paragraph. But of course it isn't going to be a paragraph. I'm going to read it to you rather slowly, and I want you to try and get a handle on where subject words are and where verb words are. Just read it to you. A birth certificate, a marriage certificate, a death certificate, and stories about his family and his debts give the reader a fleeting glimpse of the man, breathe life into his ghost-like presence, and fill in gaps left blank by art historical accounts. Well, let's try this, Pippa. Where's the first subject that you see? And the rest of you, don't wait on Pippa. Go ahead and mark it as you see it. If you're wrong, you can make a correction.
I will probably be wrong. About?
Let me ask you a question. Can you say about went to the store, about bought a book, about
No.
enjoyed reading it?
No.
What is about, Scott?
About as a preposition.
A preposition. See, we're going to stumble over these, and that's just fine. Once we've reviewed them, it's not fine. is certainly fine today. Let's look at the example again. Vince, are you close enough to a book where you can tell me where a subject is here?
I can look at it.
You can look at the monitor.
Yeah.
Where's a subject?
A birth certificate.
Okay, and I'm just going to say certificate.
Yeah.
Where's your next subject?
Another certificate.
Another certificate, so we're just going to take certificate. Where's your next subject? Certificate again. Where's your next subject? Stories. Okay. And where's your verb?
Give.
Give is one. Get 2 lines under it. Can you give me another one?
Eating.
Fleeting, did you say? You know what? It's not a verb in this sentence at all, so I'm not even going to put that one down. Janice, where's the next verb?
Glimpse?
Where did you say glimpse? That's a noun. It can be a verb. Oh, that's a good one. We'll come back. I'm going to get a check above that. I want to talk about that in a minute. That was a good place to stumble. Justin, do you see a verb?
Breathe.
Breathe is one. Do you see another one?
Ghost like.
No. You can't say, I ghost like, you ghost like, he ghost like, we ghost like. And I'll come right back to that concept and we'll do something about a verb check in a minute. We'll set up a verb check in just a second. I'm making a note to myself about that. Yvonne, do you see another verb?
Feel.
Fill. Now what I want you to see is this. I want you to put a beginning bracket in front of birth certificate, and I want you to put an end bracket after debts. And what you have there is a subject, a subject, a subject, and a subject, and it looks like this. And then put a beginning bracket in front of give and an end bracket at the end of the sentence, and you have 3 verbs. But do you notice something? All of the subject words come in a cluster, one after another. It's not a matter of number. If you had 2 subjects and a verb, and then you had a subject and 3 verbs, I think you have enough right now to say, you know what, that couldn't possibly be a simple sentence because you see 2 clauses, right? You don't have enough information to know what kind of clauses you're looking at. You don't have that. But you can tell that you're looking at 2 clauses because each clause is going to start and stop with a subject-verb combination. So this is not going to work. This is not going to be a simple sentence. But these subjects all come in a row. Subject, 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 subject. You might put a big S over the whole thing. And these verbs all come in a row. Give, breathe, fill. So this is a main clause. One main clause. And it forms one simple sentence. It just has more than one subject and more than one verb. Now, I think it was Janice who said glimpse could be a verb. And you know, in some cases, she'd be right. This is an interesting thing about English versus anything else, I suppose. If this were a Spanish class and not an English one, and we were looking at a basic verb like to have, the verb tener is to have, and we started to conjugate that verb and we said tango, the I ending here would tell you that means I. This stem would tell you it means have, and it's going to be a verb, first person, present tense, every single time. It's never going to change. Unfortunately, English doesn't work that way. Because with English, words keep hopping around and changing position and becoming different parts of speech. It's why if you're going to take a foreign language and you said, could I recommend an easy one? Spanish, hands down. 1, the words spell the way they sound. It's a phonic language. And 2, once you learn a rule, that's pretty much it. There are a few exceptions, but very few. In English, unfortunately, every time somebody hands you a rule, you get 10 exceptions that go with it. This part of speech, this word, Jerry, hand, H-A-N-D, what part of speech is that?
Physical.
Well, it's physical, I know, but what part of speech would you say?
I have
Janice, what would you tell me?
I have no idea.
Really? Vince, what part of speech is the word hand?
Noun.
A noun, I agree. So if I look behind me and say, Pippa has a small hand, you're right, it's a noun. But if I say, Pippa, hand me your pen, it just became a verb. If I said, Pippa, you're wearing a hand-knit sweater, now it's a noun modifier, an adjective if you like, and it's describing sweater. So in this sentence, Janice, that you were looking at, give the reader a fleeting glimpse. That's going to be a noun and not a verb. The other thing I wanted to look at was ghost-like. One of you said something about ghost-like. So let's just take a second. Make a note in your book, please, about a verb check. I think this is something I did not provide you with. And the singular side is going to have I, you, and he, she, and it. Just make a note. You have plenty of room to make notes here. And the plural side is going to be over here, and it's going to be we, you again. This is going to be the singular you. This is going to be the plural you, and they. And when you want to know, this is something foreign languages do all the time. Am I looking at something that could be a verb? It's going to fit in that verb check. And if it doesn't fit in that verb check somewhere, probably you're not looking at a verb. If you were looking at the verb, the word, let's just say word, writes, and you said to yourself, I wonder if writes could be a verb. You run it through. I writes, no. You do hear people speak that way, but of course they're wrong. You writes, no. He writes, yes. It fits one spot. So you know it's a verb. How about is? I is here. No, I do hear people speak that way, but of course it's not correct. You is here. That's not right either. But how about he is here? So that's an irregular verb, the verb to be. It hops all over the place. I am, you are, he is. But if it fits one slot, we know we're looking at a verb. Well, what about ghost-like? Because one of you just suggested ghost-like. If you're in doubt, try it on the verb check. I ghost-like. You ghost-like, he ghost-like, we ghost-like, you ghost-like, they ghost-like. Doesn't fit anywhere? Then probably you're not looking at a verb. But you don't stop there. You're all walking around with a dictionary. I just made that point to you. So the next thing that you would do would be to go to the dictionary and say, gee, I thought that was a verb. What is it? And at the moment, you don't even care about the meaning. You just want to know, can ghost-like ever be a verb? Justin, you've got that in your hands. Punch it up and tell us what part of speech ghost-like is.
Gives me several.
Give me.
It's a noun.
Okay.
A verb.
A verb?
Well, it says ghost is a verb, so.
But not ghost-like?
No.
No. So how about ghost-like? What do you have, Maritza? What do you have?
Ghost-like and adjective.
Yeah.
Period.
That's
Okay?
it.
That's all you have to do. You run it through the verb check, and it's like 10 seconds when you run it through yourself. And if it doesn't work, how funny, go to your dictionary and check it out. Now, sometimes if you're looking at a word like laughing, L-A-U-G-H-I-N-G, and you say, I laughing, you laughing, he laughing, we laughing, they laughing, that doesn't work. But if you lop off the ing and you say, I laugh, you've got a winner. It's a different form. It's a half verb. But there's nothing you can lop off of ghost-like. That just isn't going to work. So when you have a sentence like the one we were just looking at that has more than one subject, more than one verb, it's going to come out looking like this. Your sentence should be marked the way I have marked it. Certificate is your first subject. Certificate is your second subject. It's your third subject. It's your fourth subject. And then you have these three verbs, giving you a main clause, only one. So giving you a simple sentence that looks like this. More than one subject, more than one verb. Well, can you imagine that if that's the case, it must be possible to have a variation of the same thing? So that we can look at this simple sentence, which is a little bit shorter. Now, this should be cake. You should be able to analyze this one very quickly. More than one subject, only one verb. A birth certificate, a marriage certificate, a death certificate, and stories about his family and his debts give the reader a fleeting glimpse of the man. Jessica, where are my subject words?
What was the question?
What was the question? Do you see why I give listening tests? Did I tell you a story about listening tests? She's probably thinking I'd like a break or my lunch or both. So she got the question, but nothing that went before. Farah, look at this for me. Where's the subject?
Certificate.
Certificate, much louder. Where's the next one?
Certificate.
Certificate again. How about the next one?
Certificate.
Certificate, and the next one?
Stories.
Story. How about my verb?
Give.
Give. So I have something that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4 subjects and one verb. What kind of a clause is this, Farah? Farah, I wouldn't be unfair. We've only talked about one kind of clause all day. What kind of clause is that? Good. So this must be a main clause. I'm going to label it M-1. How many main clauses do I have here, Farah? Total of how many? Jeff, how many?
1.
Yes. If I have only one main clause, Jeff, what kind of a sentence is it?
Simple sentence.
Simple sentence indeed. That sentence, when we look at it, looks like this, right? Just exactly what Farah and Jeff helped me do. Your subjects are certificate, 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 stories. Your verb is give. You have one main clause that gives you one simple sentence, and it diagrams like this. 4 subjects, but only one verb. Question? Yes, Scott.
In that sentence, the subjects, it says a birth certificate, but birth is not part of the subject, and in marriage certificate, but marriage is not part of the subject, right?
These are noun modifiers, adjectives if you like. So if we're looking at the core words that the clause is dependent upon, we're only going to the core noun. If I tell you, my coat got lost, where's the subject? It's not in the book. My coat got lost, where's the subject, Scott?
Coat.
If I tell you my new blue fur coat got lost, where's the subject?
Coat.
That's right. I don't care about my and new and blue and fur because all of those are only noun modifiers. I want to do one more example and then we'll take a break. Look at variation 2, very similar to what we were just looking at. This time we're only going to have one subject and we're going to have more than one verb. So now this reads, stories about his family and his debts give the reader a fleeting glimpse of the man, breathe life into his ghost-like presence, and fill in gaps left blank by art historical accounts. Scott, where's the subject this time?
Stories.
And what about a verb?
Give.
And another verb?
Breathe.
And another verb?
Fill.
So how many subjects do I have?
1.
And how many verbs?
3.
What kind of a clause do I have?
A main clause.
What kind of a sentence does that give me?
Simple.
Everybody see that? Is that beginning to make sense? If we look again at an analysis of that, it comes out exactly the way Scott said it came out. Only one subject, more than one verb. Stories, but you have 3 verbs. Stories give, breathe, and fill. Gives us a main clause. Gives us a simple sentence. Okay? Any question? Pippa?
So basically, it doesn't matter how many subjects or how many verbs, as long as it's subjects and verbs,
Right.
it's a main.
It's a clause. It
It's
may not be a main clause.
clause.
A
Okay.
clause, because there's more than one kind of clause. But if you have subject, 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 verb, and then you have subject, verb, never mind what kind of sentence it could be, you tell it you've got 2 clauses, and it can't be a simple sentence because it would be 2 clauses.
Okay.
The normal word order in English, I told you about 90% of the time, would be subject, verb, object. You might make a note about that somewhere. But sometimes, and this is not in your book, I'm talking to you about something you may want to make a note on. Sometimes when you're analyzing a clause, that happened today, it's difficult to find the subject. And sometimes that's because you have an inverted clause. You know that if normal word order 90% of the time is subject first, there's going to be a time when the subject is not first. There's going to be a time when the verb comes before the object. And these 2 words, here and there, often, but not always, trigger that kind of an inversion. So if you'd go to page 11, you have an example of an inverted clause. Again, try to get the jump on what I'm saying and see if you can sort out for yourself where is a verb. A verb would make me happy if you found that right now, but you can look for a subject as well. So the sentence reads this way. Here is a series of fragmented stories about paintings lost, paintings found, and unpaid debts. Now I'm looking at that sentence and I'm having trouble finding a subject. So what I want to do is to try and find a verb. Jeff, do you see a verb in all of that?
No.
No. Jessica, do you see a verb in all of that? I'm getting a maybe. I'm reading the lines on her face.
Is.
What did you say?
Is.
Is. Good. Got it. Now, get 2 lines under is, get a V above it, box off here, and get a check above that. Now, you see what we did? We couldn't find the subject, but we noted that this particular clause started with the word here. That's a watch-out word. So if we have the verb taken care of, is, then, Jessica, I can ask myself a question based on that verb that should lead us to the subject. I could say, who is here, if the subject happened to be a person, or I could say, what is here, if it happened to be an object, a thing. So I'm going to ask, what is here? Now, where's my subject?
Series.
Series. Get a line under it. Get an S above it. This forms what kind of a clause, Jessica?
Clause.
M-1. What kind of a sentence are we looking at?
Simple sentence.
Simple sentence. Do you all see that? And this sentence looks like this. It's inverted. Why is that? Because the verb comes in front of the subject. This won't always be the case. Inverted clauses can come up without any warning, but here and there often trigger such an inversion. Let's look at another example. Here's another one. There are no written accounts by the artist to give the reader accurate knowledge about his feelings or his thoughts. Jerry, I don't see anything that looks like a subject here. Can you help me find a verb?
Are.
You get 2 lines under are, put a V above it, box off there, it's a watch-out word, get a check above that. Now you can ask yourself a question based on the verb. What are there?
The accounts.
Exactly. So that gives me a subject. And what kind of a clause?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
To be a simple.
Right. So this sentence too looks like this, inverted, because the verb is coming in front of the subject. And you have that note in your book on page 11. In an inverted clause, the verb comes before the subject. You probably don't need me to remind you that this is something you put on a cassette grammar review tape. That's what an inverted clause means. And when you flip those sentences around, they're going to look different, but they don't just yet. What we looked at was this, verb coming in front of the subject. We started out with here, and we got verb, and then we got subject. We started out with there, a watch-out word, and we got are, verb, and accounts, subject. And we said that those particular variations look like this. They still form main clauses. Of course, they still form simple sentences. You can always turn an inverted clause around, and when you turn these particular sentences around, you can always turn them around. This is what you get. A series is here of fragmented stories. So series now is where you expect to find it, subject before verb. No written accounts are there. Again, accounts, the subject, is where you expect to find it, in front of your verb. You still have a main clause. You still have a simple sentence here as well. But this time, your word order looks like that. Yes, Maritza?
Karen, in that first sentence, can we say a series of fragmented stories is here?
You can move here anywhere you like.
Okay.
You can say, you can even leave it in the front. You can say, here, a series is of fragmented stories. Or a series is, I like it there, but you can move it around a little bit. Okay. A series of fragmented stories is here. It's going to be awkward if you do that.
Okay.
Sometimes you can move things around, but you're going to have to go by sound on this too. And this is probably the smoothest way of turning those 2 particular examples around. Scott?
I was just, to me, it would make sense. A series of fragmented stories about paintings lost, paintings found, and unpaid debts is here.
But then you're right, but you're going to split your subject and your verb. You're absolutely right, and you can do that far apart, which makes it harder to tell. But yes, you certainly can do that. I mean, that's one of the gifts you get after mastering the language. You can move things around any way you like and still make sense. Okay, now, there and here don't always trigger an inversion, and I want you to be aware of that. Look at this particular sentence. Here you have some facts. Johannes Vermeer was baptized on October 31st, 1632, in New Church in the Dutch town of Delft. Amy, where's your first subject?
You.
About the verb. Have. And what kind of a clause is this?
Main.
Right, it is. And if that's all we were looking at, we'd have a simple sentence, but we have two different clauses here. In that second clause, Pippa, where's the subject?
Johannes Vermeer.
About the verb.
Was.
That's 50%.
Baptized.
And what kind of a clause does that give us?
Main.
So that gives us another main clause. We know we're not looking at a simple sentence, but what I really wanted you to see was this first part. It starts with here, and yet you have normal word order. The subject comes in front of the verb. Take a look at this next one. There you may visit his remains. He was entombed in Delft's old church on December 16, 1675. Again, it's not a simple sentence. That's not my interest at this point. What would you say, Yvonne, is the first subject?
You.
About the verb.
May visit.
And what kind of a clause is that?
Clause.
Now that's what I want to focus on because, again, this starts with the word there, and the word order is normal. The subject is coming in front of the verb. And even though this is not a simple sentence, we have another clause to deal with. Where is your subject and your verb?
Was entombed.
Right. And what kind of a clause is that?
Main clause too.
Right, but it doesn't give us a simple sentence because it gives us a second main clause. Yes, Scott?
I'm surprised in that, that may is part of the verb there.
It's a helping verb.
Ah, okay.
It's a helping verb. So in those two examples that you just looked at, to focus in on the key elements, your subject comes before the verb. We're back to normal word order. When those sentences are rewritten in normal word order, the part that I'm interested in looks like this. You have some facts here. You may visit his remains there. Normal word order because the subject is coming in front of the verb. Now sometimes, if we move to page 12, you have an inverted clause where the verb itself consists of more than one word. So here's an example. Here are some paintings to be closely observed, and the painting titles are italicized. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, Woman in Blue Reading a Letter, Girl with a Red Hat, and a Lady Writing, and these are all paintings by Vermeer. If we take a look at the first example, Vince, where's a subject? Where's a verb? I don't see a subject. You see a verb? Are. So 2 lines under are, get a V above it, get a box around here, get a check above it, because we know we're dealing with an inverted clause. If I ask you, I'm interested at the moment in locating the subject, what are here, then the subject turns out to be? Where is it, Justin?
Paintings?
Paintings, good. Get an S above that. Now, the problem is, I only picked up 25% of the verb, Justin. Where's the other 75% in this case? Maritza, do you know? Jerry, do you know?
To be closely observed?
I'll take part of that.
Oh, to be and observed.
Yes. Watch out for this one. If you run it by your verb check, I closely, you closely, it's not going to be a verb. And also circle the ly ending on closely and make a note adv. It's an adverb. It's never going to be a verb, and the ly ending is the tip-off. Something ends in ly is not going to be a verb. So I want you to, I think I'll use a colored pencil to make this point just a little bit stronger. I want you to take your pen and go from R and arc it over to be. Now what you had there was a main clause, inverted, where the verb consisted of more than one word. And when that's the case, the verb parts divide around the subject. It's still a main clause, by the way, and it's still a simple sentence. But you can see part of the verb is here and part of the verb is there. Subject happens to be right in the middle. Here's another inverted clause. Let's see what we get out of this. There are books written by current novelists on these particular works of art. Elbelin, where is a verb? I can't find a subject.
The verb is are.
Are. And notice again, box off there. We expect problems. This is a problem because the verb is coming first. So what are there? Where's my subject?
Written.
Written is a subject, written went to Valco, and written bought a good book, and written brought it home. Where is it, Jeff?
Books.
Books is my subject. Now, the problem, Elbolin, is are is only 50% this time of the verb. Where's the other 50%? Jeff, help me.
I'm not exactly sure either.
What do you think, Jessica?
By.
By? Well, you know what? If it were B-U-Y, I'd agree with you. But by, unfortunately, is going to be a preposition that we could toss right out of the sentence. Scott, where's the other half of that verb?
Written?
Right. So get 2 lines under written, and with your pen, arc over R to written. It gives us a main clause. It gives us a simple sentence. The part you need to see again is that in each of these last 2 examples, you had an inverted clause, and the verb consisted of more than 1 word, so it divides around the subject. That was the same case here. Books is the subject, but the verb consisting of more than 1 word in an inverted clause divides around the subject. Here it is analyzed a little bit more clearly. A verb that contains more than 1 word is going to divide around the subject every single time. So your verb is are, and it's to be observed. Your subject is paintings, and you get this kind of a construction. Here you have are, that's your verb, books is in the middle, written is the second part of that verb. It circles the subject. In both cases, you're starting out with these problematic words here and there, and in both cases you have main clauses that turn out to be simple sentences. Yes, Scott, go ahead.
In this particular examples, when we talk about more than 1 verb, does it ever not wrap around, or is it always wrap around?
If the verb is more than 1 word, it's always going to do that, and the clause is inverted, it's always going to wrap around. I can't think of an exception where it won't. Pippa?
What I am confused about is if you're in an inverted and you have a verb and then you have a subject, is it always if the verb is first that it's going to have another part of the verb connected after a subject?
Only if the verb consists of more than 1 word.
Now what constitutes a verb needing to consist of more than 1 word?
Well, there isn't anything that programs it, but if I say, I have to give you an inversion. Here is a table. When I turn that around, a table is here. I've only got 1 verb. But if my verb has more than 1 word, it's going to flip around. Look at this one when you turn it around. You can see all the parts. When this inverted clause is flipped around, normal word order now, right? Then you're going to get paintings in the front and are to be observed following. Normal word order, you're not going to get that division. It's when the verb comes in front of the subject and it's more than 1 word that it's going to flip around. See that troublemaking word a minute ago? It's over here at the end now. Some paintings are to be observed closely here. We can move here around. We have that option. And then you get this series of paintings again. The girl with the pearl earring, woman in blue reading a letter, girl with a red hat, and a lady writing. I want you to take a look at these paintings one at a time because they're going to come up for us. These are particular paintings by Vermeer that books were written on. They're very frequently written novels. The first one, Girl with a Pearl Earring, is the one I told you captured my attention initially. It was painted in 1665, and this is the cover of the book by, we'll see in a second, Tracy Chevalier. Very beautiful painting. And the real painting is only about the size of a piece of notebook paper. Not much bigger than that. These are very small. And then he did Woman in Blue reading a letter in the 60s again. And that, a variation of that is used as a cover in Susan Vreeland's book, we'll see in just a second. And then he did another one called Girl with a Red Hat. And that one is the cover and partial subject of John Bailey's novel on that particular painting. And finally, there's a book written called The Music Lesson, but the cover of the book has nothing to do with that particular painting. The author chose to use a lady writing. Vermeer actually did a painting called The Music Lesson, but the author of the novel chose a lady writing to use as the cover painting on that particular book. So, the other sentence that we looked at that was inverted, we're flipping it around to normal word order now, and it looks like this. Real easy to analyze when it's a normal word order. Books are written, here's the subject, here's the verb, there, see we moved there over here out of the way, by current novelists on these particular works of art. So that gives us again a main clause and a simple sentence. And we just looked at paintings that inspired the authors who used these to come up with their own books. So now we'll take a look at the books themselves. And the first one is Girl with the Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier. And she wrote a whole novel based on an imagined story. It wasn't totally imagined. This is historical fiction. She did very careful research, but she decided that she would choose who the model and what the circumstances of her life in the Vermeer household would be. It's a fascinating novel. And the next author, these are the very recently, last couple of years, Susan Vreeland. She's an art historian as well as an English teacher, and she wrote this book called Girl in Hyacinth Blue. You can tell that it was based on that painting of Woman in Blue reading a letter, but she made up the Vermeer painting, and she made up the painting. This one is not based on a real painting by Vermeer. And then the next one, Red Hat. If you have seen the movie Iris, you might know that John Bailey was the husband of Iris Murdoch. He's also a major scholar at Oxford University in England, retired teacher now. And he wrote this book called The Red Hat, where he used this particular painting by Vermeer as a major focal point of his story. And finally, Catherine Weber, who teaches English at Yale University, made up her own Vermeer painting and titled her book The Music Lesson, based on a Vermeer painting that was owned by Queen Elizabeth, but the real music lesson is not what she's talking about, and she chose to use a fragment of the Vermeer's painting called A Lady Writing a Letter to use for the cover of her book. Well now, one more thing on simple sentences. Those rules we were talking about in terms of inversion apply to questions, because questions are often, not always, but often inverted. When you look at a question like this, would you like to feed your imagination by stepping into the world of a painted canvas? The easiest way to deal with it is to figure out, how would you say that same thing as a statement? And if you say it as a statement, it means you flip it around automatically to normal word order. You don't get to add words. You don't get to subtract words. You don't get to change words. You just get to rearrange them. Jeff, if I say to you, do you like movies? Turn that around. I gave you 4 words. I want it in normal word order. Do you like movies?
Movies do you like?
You don't speak that way. That's still a question. If I said to you, did you eat breakfast? And I asked you to turn it around, it should come back to me this way. You did eat breakfast. If I said, where are you going? It should come back to me this way. You are going where? I don't add words. I don't subtract words. I don't change words. I only get to rearrange them, right?
Okay.
So, do you like movies? Turn that around. The moment you see yourself struggling, people, it's an automatic. Go home and write 4 questions and try to rewrite them as sentences. It's an automatic. Nobody needs to tell you that. Do you like movies, Jerry? Can you read that back to me mentally as a statement? 4 words.
Do I like movies?
No, you can't have an I in there. You don't get to add, change, subtract. You only get to rearrange. Pippa, do you like movies?
You do like movies.
Okay. Now, when you say that,
Pippa.
you do like movies, your subject is?
You
And your verb is?
do like.
That's right. The reason for turning it into a statement is because the inversion, and you asked this question a minute ago, if the verb divides around the subject, the reason for turning it into a statement is now the verb parts go back together. Having said that, look at this question, Pippa. Would you like to feed your imagination by stepping into the world of a painted canvas? And what I'm asking you to do is to reread that back to me as a statement.
You would like to feed your imagination by stepping into the world of a painted canvas.
Perfect. Where's your subject?
You.
How about your verb?
Like, would it be like to or like to feed?
75%. Where's the missing 25? Maritza, where's the missing 25?
Will.
Would. Pippa, what kind of a clause does that give you?
It's a main.
What kind of a sentence does it give you?
Simple.
You see what happened there, people? This is an inverted clause. The verb came in front of the subject. The subject consisted of more than one word. If you turn the question into a statement, then the verb words go back together again, side by side, where they belong. Here comes another question. Same concept. Ben, have you ever tried to unravel a mystery by letting painted images on a canvas tell you their story? Turn that around for me.
Oh boy.
Let's all read it again. You all sort of figure it out mentally. See if you can do this. Have you ever tried to unravel a mystery by letting painted images on a canvas tell you their story? Stop, Ben. Have you ever been to San Francisco?
Yes, I have.
No, I don't want to know yes, you have. I want you to turn that around for me as a statement. Have you ever been to San Francisco? Amy, turn it around. Have you ever been to San Francisco? You know what? Somebody told me something, and I don't believe it. Somebody told me that most people living right here in the North Bay area, as we are, have never been to San Francisco, which is 49 miles away. I find that difficult to believe. Justin, have you ever been to San Francisco?
You ever have been to San Francisco?
Still a question. I want a statement. Have you ever been to San Francisco? Janice?
You have ever been to San Francisco?
That'll work. Where's your subject?
San Francisco.
No way, Jose.
You
Word order, remember, comes first. So you, verb,
have
have what?
ever
No. I ever, you ever, he ever, we ever, they ever. It's not going to pass the verb check.
been.
And if you had turned your sentence around slightly in a different way, have you ever been to San Francisco? And you said, you have been to San Francisco ever. It would have been easier to spot. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Let me pick a song title. Jerry, do you know the way to San Jose? Turn that around for me.
You know the way to San Jose.
I want all the words. You can't leave any out.
You do know the way to San Jose.
Where's your subject?
You
Where's your verb?
do.
Where's the other half of the verb?
San Jose.
No
No,
way.
no, you know.
You do know. What was your question, Jerry? Lost it. You got to write down questions. When they come flashing in front of you, you've got to learn to write them down just as they go. Now, I'm still stuck. Have you ever tried to unravel a mystery by letting painted images on a canvas tell you their story? Jerry, can you turn that around for me?
You have tried to ever unravel a mystery by letting the paintings imagine on a canvas tell you their story?
Right. I probably would have moved ever to the end, but that's okay. Where's your subject? That's what I'm.
You.
Where's your verb?
Have.
Where's the other half of the verb?
Tried?
No, it's not the
Tried
other
to.
half. Tried more?
Unravel. Tried to unravel.
Exactly. And that gives us what kind of a clause?
Main.
And what kind of a sentence?
Simple.
And notice you have an inversion. The verb comes in front of the subject. The verb in this case happens to consist of more than one word, so it's going to divide around the subject. When you flip those two sentences that we were just looking at around, this is what you get. You would like to feed your imagination by stepping into the world of a painted canvas. When it's turned around like that, it's pretty easy to spot. And you turn it around for structural analysis. The verb parts divided in the question come back together in the proper order. When you flip it around into a statement, it gives us a main clause. It gives us a simple sentence. In the case of the other example that we just looked at, and I want to make a comment about this one, you have tried to unravel a mystery by letting painted images on a canvas tell you their story. Ever, your subject is you, and your verb is have tried to unravel. Normal word order, easy to see now, a main clause, a simple sentence. If you drop ever to the end, this is also what Janice didn't do, you could say, well, whoever would talk like that? Doesn't that sound awkward? You have tried to unravel a mystery ever. Yes, it does, but you're not dealing with the sound value here. You're dealing with structural analysis. And to see where your subject and verb component parts are, this is the easiest way to do it, to turn it around. Let me make one more comment and see if we have any questions. We have reviewed everything you and the world need to know about simple sentences. Now that's it. That's the end of the story. I ought to be able to give you a test today, and you ought to be able to make an A. In a perfect world, that's how it would be. These are the only possible combinations. Remember that a simple sentence has one main clause that stands alone. It can have just one subject and just one verb. Or, in the case of a command, the subject can be implied. Or, you can have more than one subject, more than one verb, and if that's the case, you can have variations of the above. You can have more than one subject and only one verb, or only one subject and more than one verb. And the bottom example, the verb could come in front of the subject. That's it. That's the story complete. Simple sentence overview completed. Who's got a question? Yes, Scott.
So by turning a question around, have you ever been to San Francisco? You have been to San Francisco ever? You're not encouraging us or suggesting to us that we write like this.
No, it's awkward.
You're just showing us a process by which we can analyze whether or not we have a complete and solid sentence, right?
Well, to analyze where your subject and where your verb components are, and by so doing, determine what kind of a clause you've got, what kind of a sentence you have. It's just a structural analysis thing that we're after, because you'd go back to the question. You would go back to the question. Anybody else with a question on that? I want you to look at the grammar review on the website to see how that works. And I'll probably be asking you to do that at the end of every lecture. So I want you to make a note in your book. Every time we cover something, that material is recovered for you on the faculty website. And make a note about the URL for that website. I asked you to do that at the beginning of the hour, I think. It's grammar, spelled correctly, .deanzacollege.org. And this time, once we get that up, we'll click on the link marked clause, because that's where we started the information that was presented today. So you go to grammar.deanzacollege.org. If we could do that in the control room, we'll see how that works. Grammar dot on your computer, because I don't have a keyboard in front of me at the moment. Grammar.deanzacollege.org, and that will take you straight to that grammar tutorial. And it's coming up. Okay, we'll get back to that in just a second, actually. And in the meantime, I want to talk to you about a written assignment, because that's going to come up, and we'll do a little bit with the grammar tutorial in a minute. If you'd go to the other textbook, laying out the text on page 11, I want to go over with you the directions that apply to writing a 4-paragraph diagnostic essay. And actually, that section of the book goes for quite a number of pages, because I've given you a lot of samples to look at, but what I really want you to do is to note that my purpose for this assignment on this preliminary essay is to find out more about you. And I want to know those things about you that you're willing to tell me. At the same time, remember, I'm going to give you the personalized self-portrait of where your grammar problems lie in the field of English, in the field of grammar. So I told you I will mark everything that you do right, certainly everything that you do wrong, to show you if your writing problems tend to be agreement, diction, spelling, we don't know. Again, if you submit that essay, you're going to get a check. You won't get a letter grade on it. I will comment on it. I will return it back to you. But if you don't submit it at all, you're going to receive an F. And the directions on page 11 ask you to do these things. Your opening paragraph should contain an opinion. Technically, that would be called a thesis statement, because that opinion is going to govern the content of your whole essay. Don't worry about it. If you can figure out what an opinion is, fine. If not, I want to see how you approach this assignment. I'd like you to use a separate sentence for each subpoint if you could. And then paragraph 2 is going to give me an expanded narrative on your first subpoint. Might be something about your favorite hobbies, I don't know. And paragraph 3 is going to give me a detailed discussion on your second subpoint. It might be about your ethnic origins if they're particularly interesting. And paragraph 4 should simply give me a detailed reminder for each of the subpoints that you talked about in the same order that they were presented. So if hobbies was your first subpoint, then paragraph 2 would have been that. Paragraph 3 would have been on ethnic origin. then your concluding reminders would give me a detailed example from your hobby and then a detailed example from your ethnic origins. And I'm asking you to consider these possible topics for subpoints, your ethnic background. Sometimes that's really interesting. Or your academic major, what you're studying, why, what you hope to do with that major, what your career plans are. If you have a job right now that's particularly interesting, I'd like to know about that. I'd like to know what your hobbies are, if you have some really interesting hobbies, but pick 2. And then, as with all assignments for this course, you must type this. And I'd like you to put your name and your class and the date in the upper left-hand corner. When you type it, please use a 14 font. Please double space. Please use justified text and center the title of your essay. Tab in once to start each paragraph. When I say justified text, on your title bar, you know you have something that aligns left, and then you have something that is center, and then you have something that aligns right, and then you have something that gets all your lines out equally. That's justified text, and if you can figure it out, that's my preference. A 14 font, double-spaced, justified text. So your essay is going to look like this. You're going to put your name in the upper left-hand corner, and you're going to say English 100B DL, short for distance learning. You're going to give me the date. You're going to give me the title of your essay. This would be my kind of a start. My life has been a rather complicated one. I come from a very unusual background. I was born in, so you can tell that my first subpoint is going to wind up to be about ethnic origin. And maybe my second subpoint is going to be about academic accomplishments. I don't know. And then I would go on to tell you more about my background. To know when to turn the assignment in and where to turn it in, please refer to your course syllabus, because that will give you more information about due dates and places to turn that in. And then in our next session, we'll go back to the URL in just a second, but in our next session I can tell you what we're going to do. We're going to be reviewing everything we had to say about clause and simple sentence so that you have mastered that, and we will also discuss how you punctuate items in a series. You do need your textbooks. You should be following along with us at home, and those of us in class will be coming up with questions for the rest of you. So now if we could go back to the website for just a second. It's grammar.deanzacollege.org, and that brings you up to the faculty site. Now everything we talked about today is going to be in those first couple of links. So if you link onto clause, click onto clause, you're going to get a different set of examples that are based on things Hawaiian, but they're going to cover the same information that we talked about today. So it's going to remind you, it's a little hard to read on the screen, that a clause is a group of words that contains a complete subject and a complete verb. Another thing I asked you to highlight and to put on a grammar review cassette tape earlier today, all sentences are determined by the number and type of clauses they contain, and other things that we talked about with new examples that you've never looked at. I can see that the next heading right below that is going to be on the simple sentence, and that's going to remind you that a simple sentence has one main clause, one independent clause, if you like, that stands alone. And then you're going to be given examples. If we go back for just a second, and you see that you go to exercise 1, now you can't do this online, but let's see how it goes. It's going to remind you about locating subjects and verbs in questions, which is something that we just did. When you have a question, sticking to the numbered part of what you see, you're going to write your question. You're going to rewrite it as a statement. When you rewrite it as a statement, in the statement, it's pretty easy to track where's my subject, where's my verb, and then you'll arrow it back up to the question and remark those same components in the question format. And there's an exercise that I will formally assign on that. Notice that on this particular exercise, it looks like you could write those questions and rewrites at home and mail it in to me, but you can't, because this link is not set up to do that. So the link is not valid, but the rest of it is. And one more thing, if we back up one more time, and we go to what we were talking about in terms of the simple sentence, and you go to exercise 2, which is locating verbs in simple sentences, you're going to be looking at the history of the aloha shirt. You're going to have been given the verb. It'll be colorized in blue for you. The beautiful shirt on the right-hand side of your screen is the one that was worn by Montgomery Clift in the death scene of From Here to Eternity. And there is a history to the aloha shirt, if you can believe that. I wrote these exercises when I was teaching for the University of Hawaii for Maui Community College. And so you're going to learn a lot if you go through these exercises about different things that pertain to Hawaii. History of the aloha shirt. If you can imagine the history of the buttons that used to be placed on high-priced, very gorgeous aloha shirts, the history of the Hawaiian lei, the history of the sugar plantations on the islands, and so forth. And the neat thing about it is you'll be given sentences. It's a little hard to see it in here, but you'll be given sentences. Well, for example, let's go back up to the top of that particular exercise. You're given an example that gives you a simple sentence where Hawaiian shirts were popularized by residents from all walks of life during the first half of the century, and shirts, as you can see, is colorized in blue, and then you would type in the verb, were popularized. Immediately, if you click on the click your answer button, you see that were popularized is correct. If you're wrong, you know you're wrong. And so you have a whole lot of exercises to go through. That next one says the shirts help to put and I can't read that very clearly myself, Hawaii on the map for many people living on the mainland. So shirts would be a given, and if you typed in helped, and I'll just say type in helped for the moment, if we go ahead and get that typed, and you say, well, I think maybe helped is the verb, when you click on the answer, you'll see that it should have been helped to put, and that your answer would have been incomplete. So you'll learn a lot about Hawaii, which I think is very interesting, and at the same time you'll be able to get more facility in finding the complete subject and the complete verb. So that's there for you to use. An exercise we just looked at said find the verb. The next exercise is going to say verb is a given, find the subject, and finally it's going to say nothing is a given. Here are a series of simple sentences. Could you please type in the subject and the verb? And it's like having me looking over or any instructor looking over your shoulder to see if you're accurate in coming up with subject-verb combinations. So we have time for some questions about anything you'd like to ask. Scott?
At first I was awkward using your grammar tutorial on your website, but after I got used to it, it was really helpful. And one of the things I found was by using the mouse to point and click, you can go from one part of your course to another part of your course and see how your course builds upon itself and where it's going, where it's leading.
Good. I think that's valid. I do think it's helpful. I also think it's interesting. If it were dull examples, that might be one thing, but I found things like the history of the lei really fascinating. Anybody else with a question or a comment about anything at all? Let me just do a little bit of practicing. We know what a simple sentence is. We know we're going to go over this in spades on the next session, but Justin, if I asked you for the definition of a clause, what would you tell me?
Has a subject and a verb.
Okay.
One of each.
Maybe one of each, maybe
Or-
more than
yeah.
one of each. If I asked you, Jerry, to give me a simple sentence with just one subject and just one verb about what you're going to do with the rest of your day, what would you tell me?
I'm going to relax.
Now be careful with that. Where's your subject?
I.
Where's your verb?
Going to.
50%.
Relax. There we go.
75. Now let's try that again. I'm going to relax. Your subject is I. You said going to relax was the verb. I said 75%. Where's the missing 25?
Well, no, there has to be am.
It has to be am. I am going to relax. Scott, if I asked you to give me a simple sentence that was a command, what would you say?
Look.
Oh, give me another one. I exhausted that one completely. Where's what would you like me to do for you today, Scott?
Listen.
Listen. And in listen, the verb is going to be
Listen.
and the subject is going to be
The implied you.
good. If I asked you, Ben, to give me a simple sentence that has more than one subject and more than one verb about something you're going to do for the rest of the day, what would you tell me?
I'm going to go to work and then I'm going to go home.
How about that? I'm going to go to work and then I'm going to go home. What's wrong with that?
There are two main clauses.
Yes. Where's the first one? I'm going to go to work. The subject, Maritza, is
I
Verb is
going to work.
part. I'm going
going
to
to
go
work.
to work. Where's the verb?
Going to go to work.
Am going to go to work. That's one clause. And then I'm going to go home. Now where's the subject?
I
And the verb?
am going to go home.
Home? I
Oh, no,
you
I'm
home, be
going-
home.
I'm going to go.
Right, exactly. So let's do one more, Jeff. Let's try an inverted clause. Can you give me one where the verb comes in front of the subject?
There is going to be baseball on today.
Good. There is going to be baseball on today. I don't see any subject. Where's your verb?
Is
Where is your subject?
going to be or baseball. Yeah.
Now, where's all of your verb? There is going to be baseball on TV today. Your subject is baseball. Where's your verb?
Is
More?
on today.
No.
No.
Where is his verb, Scott? There is going to be baseball on TV today. Baseball is his subject. Where's his verb?
Is going to be.
Exactly. Baseball is going to be on TV today, if you were to flip that around. Okay, people, I think you did a very fine job, and I'd like all of you to have your books for the next session. I'd like you to get your green sheets and your subscriptions to listservs and essay assignments taken care of by following the course syllabus, and we'll get ready to meet again for the next session. Books, highlighters, pens. Yvonne, you've got a question. The course syllabus will be ready for you. It is ready for you now, so all you have to do is pick it up. Anybody else with a question? Yes, Jerry.
Where do we pick it up?
Refer to your course syllabus. I used to pick it up, but that doesn't work. It was a good try. See if I'm wide awake. No, I will give you instructions on that as soon as we go off the air. Anybody else with a burning question? Isn't grammar fun?
Yes.
Do you love art history? You're going to love Vermeer. Okay, people, we'll pick this up on the next session. Thank you very much.